Games tend to be shoved into different categories based on their gameplay experiences, but I find the one without any clear description is often RPGs. Action is a pretty straightforward genre. The visual novel is self-explanatory. Rhythm games need no introduction, and shooters are shooters. Pretty much all these genres can be explained with just their names. Sure, some are broader than others, but none can really be considered as broad as RPG, which just stands for role-playing game. And that means kinda nothing. You're playing a role in a game. You can slash out a good number of games from this immediately, which generally come down to games without any story. In order to play a role, there must also be a role to play, and without a story, there is no role for you to fulfill. I guess technically some PvP multiplayer games there are roles, and you are playing a role, but that's considered different. RPGs are defined by you, as the player, playing a role in the story. At the same time, things are not so plain and simple, because by that description, Call of Duty has a story. You're playing a role in that story in a fictional world. Does that make it an RPG? I mean, it does have an RPG in it, but that's a different. These games are all RPGs. This is an RPG, and this one too. Essentially, the issue with this is that it's still a very broad categorization for what we define as an RPG. There is a line to be drawn somewhere, but there isn't really a good description of that line. In early days, a lot of RPGs could be defined by having turn-based combat, as most of these storytelling games, such as Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Pokemon, and many others, would use that system. It is, in a lot of ways, still synonymous with RPGs of today. But an RPG still doesn't need to be turn-based. The Elder Scrolls series is famously not turn-based, and is still an RPG. Mass Effect is a shooter, but is also considered an RPG. Both of these series have long standings in the genre, so that axes out the necessity of turn-based combat in the description. It seems the greatest thing a lot of RPGs have in common is some distinct leveling system or character progression system. And even this gets more divisive because somehow Monster Hunter Wilds was nominated for RPG of the Year at the Game Awards despite having no leveling system. There may be other RPGs without that as well, and I'm just genuinely unaware of them. But every time I try to understand what the exact guidelines are, I always come up short. At the same time, it's usually not hard to identify if a game is an RPG. So it's kind of confusing when someone asks you what an RPG is, and there's no straight answer. My basic understanding gets narrowed down to knowing one when I see it, but also having no damn clue how to define it strictly, which leaves the question of what is an RPG sometimes up a little bit to your own interpretation. Even though it actually isn't up to your own interpretation, there still is a way to categorize these games.
It was Jay who insisted on it.
So now that we're thoroughly confused, why don't we get a little more confused? Yeah, this is a subset of the RPG genre, that are Japanese. Basically, JRPGs are a subset of RPGs that are, again, not defined by a incredibly specific set of guidelines. You'd think that Japanese RPG means an RPG made by developers in Japan, and in a sense, you would be right. Tales of, Pokemon, Persona, Shin Megami Tensei, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, these are all well-known JRPG franchises. They are, indeed, RPGs developed by Japanese developers. But would you call Elden Ring a JRPG? Yes? No? I've seen both answers before, but for the most part, I see no. But it is an RPG made by Japanese people. You'll find no shortage of people arguing whether certain games are JRPGs or not. Expedition 33 is a game that is heavily inspired by JRPGs. From a gameplay perspective, it has so many elements of JRPGs in it, but there's still debate on whether it's a RPG or a JRPG. The game is developed by a French team. Does that make it an FRPG? And then you have games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail that are developed by Chinese teams Yet, they have this anime art style that is very commonly associated with JRPGs. Does that make them a JRPG? Or are they CRPGs because they're developed by Chinese people? So, essentially, to be blunt, there isn't really a incredibly clearly defined rule that anyone follows when it comes to categorizing these games as JRPGs. Yet again, I still think there is some guideline to it that allows you to identify if a game can even be associated with that category. It's such a strange paradox because most JRPGs are so obviously JRPGs, while some kind of skirt the line and it's a little unclear on what it is and what it is not.
What are you waiting for?
We're talking RPGs. It's turn-based. I'm waiting my turn.
I think there is actually a pretty clear line on what defines a JRPG, but it's not something you can always assume at face value. It essentially comes down to storytelling. JRPGs tend to be geared towards teenagers and young adults. The stories of these games usually aren't that subtle, and people are gonna take that like I'm saying as a bad thing. No, that is just how you present stories to teenagers and young adults. A lot of the times it's a lot easier to throw the themes in their face because then it makes it easier for them to grasp. There are going to be stories in your life that you're not going to understand at first hand, and then as you get older, you are going to understand them more. You're going to think you understand everything when you're 13, when you're 15, 18, 20, 21, 25, but as you get older, certain stories will resonate with you more as time goes on. Anyway, we're getting off topic here. There are deeper elements in the plot, but usually the major plot points and the thematic moments are much more in your face. Dialogue is often also the main vehicle for storytelling. While the games do a lot of showing, there is equal parts and sometimes more telling than your average Western RPG. And of course, part of this is also production value. Not to say that production value defines a JRPG, because eventually we will have JRPGs that are much more high budget, and in fact we do have some of those right now. But a lot of Western RPGs are able to tell the stories they do in the way that they do thanks to higher budgets, higher sales, and access to better technology. And JRPGs also have certain tropes and storytelling methods that just differ from the Western tropes and storytelling methods. I think anime art style is a common factor shared between a lot of JRPGs, but it doesn't automatically make these games JRPGs. Final Fantasy XVI feels more like a Western RPG rather than a JRPG. I think a good quote from the developers of Final Fantasy XVI was basically saying that we're not trying to make a JRPG, so to speak, we're just thinking about making an RPG. That makes a lot of sense when you look at 16, and it feels a little bit more like a Western game than, or I don't want to say Western, but it feels more like a regular RPG than a JRPG. There are a lot of traits just commonly associated with JRPGs that can help narrow down exactly what the genre is. Some of those traits are the same as RPGs since it's a subgenre. But drawing the line of what it is and what it is not a JRPG becomes a bit more second nature once you've played a few games in the genre.
I'll tell you, so just shut up already.
Now, to wrap this up, does any of this really matter? No. If you told me Persona was an RPG, I would say you're correct. It's just another meaningless label placed on a game. People can and will debate whether a game is a JRPG or not, sometimes as if the label of being a JRPG is somehow a bad thing. Truly, at the end of the day, I don't think any of this really matters. If you came in here wanting to figure out what a JRPG is and you wanted to start playing them, I would say pick up a game with an anime art style, and chances are it's a JRPG. I unfortunately am not going to reach a great conclusion here, and lucky for you, it's a free way to learn about the fact that I don't think we reach conclusions that often on this channel. But I can recommend some JRPGs and RPGs. There isn't much reason to force yourself to categorize a game properly. I think for basic discussion, it's important for you to understand what a genre is. But you don't really need to know like all the specifics. You can just ask, is this a JRPG or is this an RPG? and most people will give you a straight answer. And some people simply just don't enjoy the storytelling of JRPGs, so that's fine. But even within a genre you dislike, I think there's value in trying something. You never truly know if something isn't for you. But you can let me know what you think a JRPG is in the comments down below. If you think it's defined by its gameplay, its storytelling, the art style, just let me know. You can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things JRPG related. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, as a side note, I'm sick. I don't know if you can tell by the way the audio sounds, but I can. So that's why the audio kind of sounds like not as good, and my voice sounds not as good, because I've been sick for like 2 weeks, so that's pretty cool.